Hello everybody, welcome back to Instant Release. Today we're going to talk about, as I said in the last video, we're going to compare two cameras, and those are the two cameras that, in my opinion, you are looking at if you want to buy a retro stylish compact camera and you want it to be kind of Leica-like. And for the budget, we're gonna, set ourselves on the price of the cheapest real Leica around, which is the Leica X1. And that Leica X1, you can get it in good working order and in good condition for about $500. I got mine for significantly cheaper than that, but that's because it has a lot of problems, and I explained all of those in my Leica X1 review, which you can go check if you want to. Fact of the matter is, that gives us about a $500 budget, and for that budget, we can get something like this. This is the Fujifilm X100S, and for about the same price, you could get the X100 original, which specs-wise would be a lot more comparable to the X1 that we have here, but since they are both about the same price, it makes no sense to get the older and worse version, so the X100S it is. Now, if we want to compare those cameras, we absolutely need to talk about specs, but that's not the whole thing about those cameras. So the main thing that I want to talk here about, and you're gonna see that as the video progresses, I want to talk about the user experience and what those cameras are made for, because they're not made for the same thing, I don't think. So, you know what, let's talk about specs. The Leica X1 was released in 2009, so that's quite a while away, and it was equipped at the time with a 12 megapixel APS-C sensor, which, it has its problems. It does not have the most amount of dynamic range. It has a bit of noise going on, but in my opinion, the image quality you get at the Leica X1 is really good. I really like the image quality. I have absolutely no issues with the images coming out of that camera. I don't have a problem with noise or with dynamic range. Sometimes you have some highlight clipping, which can be a little bit annoying in editing when you have the raw files around, but for the most part, it's fine. The X100S, on the other hand, has a better sensor because it's newer, it's from 2013. And you have the X-Trans 2 sensor, which is the exact same sensor that you have in cameras like my X-T1, which I absolutely love. Okay, it has a very special color rendition. It's a 16 megapixel sensor that has more dynamic range, more resolution, and less noise than the 12 megapixel sensor that is in the Leica X1. So when it comes to the sensor performance itself, I think that there is no comparison here. The X100S is the better pick, but I mean, we also like coming, that's a much newer camera. When it comes to the original X100, which I had for more than a year, image quality would be very similar to the X1, and I think both cameras actually use the exact same sensor. The X100 came out in 2011 and also used a 12 megapixel APS-C sensor, which had very similar ISO ranges, different sensitivities when it comes to how it's labeled on the camera, but I think both the X100 and the X1 use a different ISO standards from each other, so I guess that's what happened. But when it comes to the ISO ranges, both cameras, the X100, X100S, as well as the Leica X1, they all have pretty much the same range. So the X1 goes from ISO 100 to 3200 natively, while the X100 and the X100S start one stop higher at ISO 200, but they also go one stop higher at ISO 6400. I think this is purely because of ISO standards and not because the sensors really have different sensitivities, because when you look at the images, you basically have the same thing when it comes to noise and stuff like that when it comes to the X100 and the X100 and the X1, sorry. The X100S has a bit of an advantage there because of the, added resolution, dynamic range, stuff like that, because of the newer sensor. So that's just for the sensor comparisons. But there is a point to talk about when it comes to image processing, when it comes to those cameras as well. The Fujifilm cameras have much better JPEG profiles, in my opinion, because they have like those film recipes that you can have. The X1 does not have that. It has some like pre-built in black profiles, but in my opinion, there is only one that is really worth using, which is the black and white high contrast. That's really the only JPEG profile that I would use in the X1, whereas in the X100S, you have some film simulations, don't have all of them, but you have the ability to create custom recipes, which basically, fill in the need for other film simulations. Like typically the X100S does not have classic Chrome, whereas my XT1 does, for example. But I can have something that looks like classic Chrome by adding a custom recipe. So that's definitely something if you are a JPEG shooter mostly. I don't think the X1 makes a ton of sense at all because the JPEGs are really meh with that camera. Like the quality is not that great and the color profile is not that good. On the X100, on the other hand, whether it be the X100 original or the X100S, I think the user experience when it comes to JPEGs is a much better experience. You have the ability to customize everything. Even on the older X100, you even have that white balance shift and everything. So honestly, even though you don't have a ton of film simulations on the X100, and you have a bit more on the X100S, but not that much more, I think both cameras are much better suited for JPEG shooters than the X1. So, well, so far, it's not a good looking time for the X1, is it? It's not going to be better because now we can talk about autofocus. And when it comes to autofocus, I think this is really where you see that the X100 are, like the X100S specifically, but also the X100 that was released 2 years after the X1, are much better cameras when it comes to user experience because they don't have any autofocus problems, in my opinion, when it comes to speed and accuracy and stuff like how snappy it is. The X100S is a pretty snappy camera when it comes to AFS. AFC is another debate, like continuous autofocus on the Fuji bodies, especially those X-Trans 2 bodies, is like questionable, but it kind of works. The point is that they have autofocus continuous, whereas the X1 strictly does not. And the AFS, the only kind of autofocus that you have on the X1, it's painfully slow. It's like really, really super slow to the point that, as I said in my X1 review, minor focus would probably be a faster experience if I had another camera. But even minor focus is a bit clunky on the X1. You only have the back dial on the camera to do it, and it's very slow, so it's really intentional. You really need, it's more like I want to set up my focus at this exact distance more than it is that you are reacting to things and you are manually focusing for it. So that's how it should be taken on the X1. So yeah, autofocus wise, the X100 clears, I think. There's no question about it. One little quirk I found on the X1 that it has two autofocus modes, which is autofocus and autofocus macro. I didn't find any speed difference between the autofocus and autofocus macro mode. On cameras like the LX5 that I had in the past, you had the same thing, like macro autofocus and standard autofocus, and the standard autofocus was much faster, and you sacrificed like the accuracy and stuff like that you had in the autofocus macro for speed in the standard autofocus mode. That's not the case with the Leica X1, but the standard autofocus mode also just straight up gives you negative focusing. Like you are not able to acquire focus if the subject is too close. The lens is perfectly able to focus that close, but you need to be in autofocus macro to do it. And it's not even like at macro distances. It's like at this distance. If you want to take a photograph of something that's this far away, you will need to be in autofocus macro mode. And since you don't have any speed disadvantage because the camera is painfully slow in both modes, well, there's no point in using the autofocus standard mode. Just be in autofocus macro all the time. That's just a little quirk. That's just something that needs to be talked about. Okay, now let's talk about the lenses. So lens-wise, the Leica X1 has a 24mm f2.8 lens, which is a Leica Elmerit branded lens. Of course, it's a Leica camera. And the Fujifilm X100, whether it's be the X100S or the X100, has a Fujidon aspherical lens, because it's a Fujifilm camera, which is a 23mm f2. So based on the specs alone, you could, maybe say, oh, but the Fuji has a one-stop advantage, so it wins. Well, it wins, but not because of that. You see, the Leica lens, when it's wide open, is sharper than the Fujifilm lens when it's wide open as well. The thing is, that most people seem to forget, is that you can close down the lens on the Fuji as well. So when you close down that lens to f2.8 or f3.2 or thereabouts, Sharpness-wise, it's about the same as the Leica X1. There is not really that much of a difference, if a difference at all. The only differences that will come, and that will be something that is down to personal judgment and user preference, but that's going to be towards the rendering, like the transition from out of focus to in focus, how busy the bokeh is, or something like that. But it's not going to be related to the sharpness or the light gathering. So, in my opinion, I personally prefer the rendering of the Leica because the lens is really magnificent, it's really sharp, even wide open, and the rendering of the bokeh, in my opinion, is slightly better. But it's not to say that the lens in the Fuji is bad by any means, and at f2.8 it's about as sharp, it's really nice rendering. It's like the difference is super small. The only difference that the Fuji has really is that it allows you to sacrifice sharpness for more light, and sometimes that might be a very useful thing to have. So if you're in low light, considering that neither of those cameras have stabilization systems and they don't have super good high ISO performance, having one stop more light coming in, even if that's at the cost of sharpness, that can be a pretty useful thing to have, and that's what makes the Fujifilm X100S or X100 win in my eyes, is just simply the fact that you have that trade-off that you can make. It gives users the choice of trading sharpness for light, whereas the Leica straight up doesn't. Another positive, I think, of the Fujifilm X100 is that it is not an extending lens. I'm removing the lens hood that I have on it right now, but it's a pancake lens through and through, meaning that you have the camera that is turned off and you turn it on and it doesn't really extend or anything like that. Whereas the Leica X1, on the other hand, when you turn that thing on, it extends quite a bit. And you can see that in terms of thickness, both cameras are absolutely not the same thing when you are using them. And so much so that if you want to have a lens hood on the Leica X1, you will need to, first of all, remove that pretty thick ring that is around here, have something that is at least this thick, and then add a lens hood on top of that, which will make a pretty bulky camera in your hand. Whereas the Fuji X100 can straight up screw in a lens hood like this one. In terms of thickness, you have something that is very similar to the Leica X1, except, well, this one has lens hood and this one does not. So that's really the biggest difference I think there is between those two cameras when it comes to handling, when it comes to the lens. Also, I'm gonna touch on to that now, I guess, but there are a lot of handling differences when it comes to how those cameras handle in your hand. So the first thing that I need to say is that the Fujifilm is not a one-handed experience. The Leica, well, the buttons that you have on the left side of the camera, they are not super useful for like everyday shooting if you are in a street setting. So you are mostly going to use it right-handed like that, and everything is accessible with your thumb. You can move your shutter speed dial with your thumb, your aperture dial with your thumb, your back dial, your top dial here. You can do everything. Even the drive mode is on like the toggle on button or switch. You can do everything one-handed on the Leica X1. Whereas on the Fuji, you have a lot more control points, but a lot of those controls are also accessible with your left hand around the lens with the aperture ring or the focus ring. And that makes the X100 a mandatory, in my opinion, two-handed experience, whereas the Leica X1 can be a one-handed experience. And if you want to use two-hand operation for that camera, it's mostly going to be to adjust like the shutter speed, or just for support, or to activate the pop-up flash. But that's about it when it comes to two-hand operation of the Leica X1. So that's one handling difference. But that advantage that the Leica has, to me, that's a little advantage. That goes away when it comes to how much more the X100 is packing when it comes to what it has on the camera itself. It's not that much bigger, like so maybe a few millimeters taller, it's about the same width, but it has a viewfinder, and it's not any viewfinder, it's the hybrid viewfinder that is like the staple of X100 cameras. On the X100 original, the EVF of that viewfinder, the OVF is great, and it's the same for like both the X100 and X100S, but the EVF is quite downgraded on the original X100. It's a 1.44 million dot display, which is not that fast, not that great when it comes to contrast and everything like that, and I really don't like that panel, and I really almost never used it. On the X100S, though, there is quite a bit of an upgrade when it comes to the EVF panel, and that meant that the camera itself is a lot more enjoyable to use when it comes to the EVF itself, because you can use it with the EVF or the OVF. You can go back and forth, and both are good, so that's actually pretty nice. It's not the best EVF around, but it does the job beautifully. I have no issues with that. If you want to have any kind of viewfinder in the X1, you don't have any contacts that you have like you have on the X2 for like an external EVF, but you can put like some optical viewfinder in the hot shoe. I don't have it around here, it's in my bag, but you can. I have like a small plastic one, which cost me like 20 bucks on Amazon to get, and it's a decent experience. It's not like amazing or anything, but it's much nicer to use in my opinion than the pretty bulky Leica official one, which is like glass and better optics and everything. But yeah, I think it makes the camera too bulky, and the small one that I have is perfect when it comes to size. But yeah, it's the Leica X1 is made to use it's made to be used with that kind of viewfinder, and you even have like a little LED next to it, next to the hot shoe that blinks green when you are in focus, which allows you to tell when you're using an external viewfinder if you are focused or not. So at least there's that. There's also like a viewfinder mode, which allows you to turn off the back screen to save on battery life while you shoot with the viewfinder. So it's not like it's completely devoid of any support for any viewfinder, but compare it to the viewfinder in the X100, and you can see how you have a bit of a difference, in my opinion. So that's pretty much everything there is to say when it comes to what you can see at first glance between these cameras, like the differences in handling and stuff like that. I haven't talked about like the smaller differences, like typically the fact that on the X100 you have the aperture ring on the lens and the focus ring on the lens, which is quite nice to have if you are doing a two-handed operation. And you know that's a physical control point for both of those, which is like logical to have here. On the X1, you have a lens that is about as thick when it's retracted, but you don't have any controls on that lens. So everything is on the rest of the camera, including the aperture, which is with that top dial here. But that means that the manual focusing is with that dial, as I said, which is annoying. And having all of those things on the lens on the X100 allows you to have another dial up there, which is the exposure compensation, which is not with a physical control on the X1. You need to go into the menu, the EV button here, to open the sub-menu, to then select it with like the selector dial in the back. It's just a bit more cumbersome. It's not the end of the world. I haven't really been bothered by it, but it's something I need to be taking into account when it comes to handling and stuff like that. The X100 is a better camera on pretty much every account, especially considering that both cameras cost the same, pretty much. So that's what I wanted to say about the handling, the stuff that you can see like right away. Now, what I want to talk about a bit more in detail when it comes to the user experience of those cameras is that I think those cameras are not made for the same people. And what I'm saying by that is that, to me, the X1 is meant for advanced users, which absolutely know what they want, and they only want to do street photography. They don't want to do anything else. The thing with the X100 is that it's much more like mainstream, like usual tool kind of camera. It's not meant for one specific thing, it's meant for a lot of things. And that means that the X100S is a lot more performance, but it's not more efficient for that specific thing that the Leica X1 is made for, which is street photography. Let's talk about that for a minute. The X100S, when it comes to manual focusing, it's not going to save up the distance at which you manually focus your camera, whereas the X1 will. And you can lock it there with like that little focus button in the back. If you're in manual focus mode, you can like lock it up, and you have like a bit of a snap focus functionality like you have on the Ricoh GR, and that allows you to, let's say you want to be focused at infinity or 5 meters away from you, and you shoot at f8, and you just turn the camera on. It takes a bit more time to be turned on compared to the X100, but you turn the camera on, you snap, you turn the camera off. That's pretty quick, and that's a quicker process than turning the X100 on, focusing, making sure it's quite like rightly focused. I don't know what my PC is doing. It's like pumping up the fans, whatever. But yeah, the X100 will have to use the autofocus, which is quite a bit snappier than the one on the X1, but it's still using the autofocus where you simply don't have to do that on the X1. And if you want to be the thing of f8 and be there on the X100, well, you will have to keep the camera on for that and not touch the focus ring, which is quite a bit more annoying, I will say, and you have to set it up in this focus by wire, and it's a bit janky. It's like non-linear, so sometimes you overshoot. It's just not the best experience in my opinion. So there's that going on. So in my opinion, just one last thing, the X100 has an built-in ND filter, but unlike the Leica X1, it's mandatory to have that on the X100 because you cannot shoot at every speed available on the camera at every aperture, whereas you can on the X1. So in my opinion, it cancels out. Anyway, my PC doing its thing again. Anyway, the main thing I want to talk about here is really the fact that those cameras are made for different users, and that will change my recommendation depending on who you are. So let's say you just want to have a Leica. And as I said in my Leica X1 review, as long as it doesn't have the badge Leica on it, you will probably not be content with it and you will not be happy about it, and you will think about, oh, I should have gone with a Leica. So if what you want is a Leica camera, then go for the X1. Don't even think about the X100. However, if you want to have a nice, well-built, performant, kind of retro premium compact camera, and the X1 and the X100 are the two cameras that you are considering, then the X100 is the camera that you want. For a load of reasons, but mostly the better performance, the better JPEG profiles, the fact that you have a viewfinder which is more practical, and the fact that the camera is simply better built with more control points and can do more than just street photography. It can open up to f2, have very soft focus, and do like some environmental portraits and whatever. That camera is a lot more versatile than the X1. However, if you are an advanced user, you know what you're doing, you mostly shoot RAW anyway, and you don't shoot JPEG, you know how to process your files, then the X1 makes a lot more sense to me, because the files, in my opinion, when it comes to the color science, are better. Also, it has that like snap focus-ish kind of feature, which in my opinion is more efficient for street, and it's operable one-handed, and it's also smaller. And if you really want to, you can always add a viewfinder on top, and it works well for that. I mostly use my X1 one like that. But to put it simply, I think the X1 makes sense for people that want to do just street photography and not anything else. For landscape or anything like that, I would recommend the X100 instead. And while the X100 is not a bad photography camera, the X1, in my opinion, is a better photography camera for street photography specifically. So that basically like sums up my whole recommendation about it. If you are an advanced user and you want a street photography specific camera, the X1 is better. If you just want to have a nice, retro-looking, nice, well-built camera, the X100S is your better pick, in my opinion. And if you want a Leica, then just go buy a Leica. Alright, I think that sums up everything I wanted to say about these cameras. If you have any questions, I would be very happy to answer questions for both of those cameras in relation to each other in the comment section. And I'm just gonna say thank you for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one. See ya.